When I close my eyes, I can almost see it. When I take a breath, you fill up my lungs. And if my mind worked backwards just for a minute, I'd hold on to you before the memory's gone. I remember you, you lift my spirit. With you high is all I'm feeling. Remember how we felt alive. I remember you, you make me stronger. Can't go without it much longer. Remember, remember, I remember you, you lift my spirit. With you high is all I'm feeling. Remember how we felt alive. I remember you, you make me stronger. Can't go without it much longer. Remember, remember. When I close my eyes, I can almost see it. When I take a breath, you fill up my lungs. And if my mind worked backwards just for a minute, I'd hold on to you before the memory's gone. I remember you, you lift my spirit. With you high is all I'm feeling. Remember how we felt alive. I remember you, you make me stronger. Can't go without it much longer. Remember, remember, I remember you, you lift my spirit. With you high is all I'm feeling. Remember how we felt alive. I remember you, you make me stronger. Can't go without it much longer. Remember, remember.
Hello, 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 and welcome back to another stream of Boomeadow Builds the State of Anarchy. We are still in Seeker's Respite, but judging by how it's looking and how it's come together, we should realistically get this finished tonight. Realistically, I say. Maybe. We'll see. How is everyone this evening? I hope you have had a wonderful day so far. Morning, afternoon, evening, night, wherever you are in the world. I hope that you have been looking after yourself. And for those who managed to show up last night or watch along for a bit with the Among Us live stream, let me know what you thought, because I would be happy to stream more Among Us if you guys were down and get to meet a bit more of the tabletop crew that we all play with. So just let me know. Hi, Root of All Beers. We at the moment are doing some map building for my upcoming campaign that will be starting on just double checking the date. Pretty sure it's the 4th of February. Where is my calendar? Yes. So on the 4th of February, we have a campaign that is starting, brand new. It is in my homebrew world, and obviously the homebrew world is what we are building. But I will say, one of the wonderful things that I have going about these builds and things like this is with your channel points and things like this, I do actually take I do take NPC suggestions. I take business name suggestions and business suggestions as well, because the only reason that this world, so it's been a build that has taken 6 years, 6 years of play and things like this in the world. So we have a lot of world lore, but it is very much a collaborative effort with the people that I play with. So all of the gods and things like this at this point are previous player characters and things like this. So the fact that I've turned around to streaming this is basically my way of bringing you guys, my followers, into that community and building a world that we can all be a part of. So there are some thoughts I have had about potentially putting together documents and things like this for my followers and my subscribers and things like this, if they would like to play in this particular setting. Because there are 4 eras, so depending on the style of play you want to play with, the technology level you want to play with and things like this, all of that stuff is open and available to play, because so the world is at least 60,000 years old, and in that time we've gone from a very sword and sorcery style play all the way up until this game, which is going to have more of your modern tech and things like this. So throughout the lore of the world and things like this, root of all beers, we are seeing the rise of grenades and things like this. Nice. Yeah, that would be amazing. I need some characters like that. We've got, so the current party makeup, so the party is going to be 6 individuals, and we have a lot of custom homebrew playable species and sub races. I have added a whole heap of choices and availability to those, depending on, to give some more variety and things like this. Like, for example, there are Aarakocran subclasses now, or sub races, should I say. That was subclasses. That's, yes, you can choose to be a bird. We've added races, some sub races like that to the species. On top of that, there are a whole heap of choices for them to play in terms of class, including some third-party classes that have come from various documents and Kickstarters that I have supported. So things like Paragon, which has come from the Corpus Angelus. There's a number of species that people have been able to see and choose to play from, like Heliana's Guide to Monster Hunting, and things like that. So yeah, really tried to give them options about what they wanted to do and things like that. So what we're actually getting to see is a really cool level of diversity, and some of the players are playing legacy characters who have connections to previous characters within the world and things like that. So the current party makeup is, we have a Titanborn Aasimar Paladin. We have a Raken, which is a raccoon person. Here's where, and you probably noticed that I was kind of changing that around because I don't necessarily adhere to that, because all of my playable species in the world, all my playable species in the world do have ability score modifiers and all of that kind of still incorporated into them. But where I make that distinct separation is because there are different species of people like obviously Aarakocra, as opposed to like a gnome and things like this. But then I've put in sub-races of that. So everything from, so for example, with the Aarakocra, they're not just able to play your standard eagle style Aarakocra. So depending on where they are from in the world, and this is where that difference is really seen, is where they are from in the world actually changes the likelihood of the species that they're going to be choosing. I've actually put regionality into it, and this is why, for example, if they are from the essentially Feywild part of the world, they can be like a peacock style Aarakocra or a hummingbird Aarakocra. Hello, Tigress, how are you? And all of that kind of stuff. So I use both species and race, rather than lineage, because there are some things that obviously are genetically predisposed. And a lot of those ability score modifiers, because there is a lot of customization to what the players can play in my world. For example, a lot of those ability score modifiers, I may not have necessarily put a lot of emphasis on those ability score modifiers going into the generally intellectual abilities like intelligence, wisdom, charisma, because all of those things can be learned. However, physicality is a little bit different. So, but even still, so at the moment, I believe there's like 136 different species and sub-races they can play. And that has taken into consideration regionality. So I've tried to be very, I suppose in a way, pedantic about where all of this, like where it actually kind of makes sense within the world. But when it comes to like the physical descriptors beyond, for example, everyone knows what a peacock looks like, but I'm not going to sit there and go, oh, well, your coloration has to be specifically this. There are actually, a broad way you can actually choose to essentially make your character look. Like I haven't turned around and said that I might say that there's a specific height range that they can pick within, but it is up to them what they look like. But I haven't kept any of the original like weight ranges or anything like that. So yeah, I've tried to be very, I've tried to go into a lot of detail with that side of things. And the other thing that I do as well is like, none of that is, my ruling on that is very much their guidelines. If you have a very specific thing you want for your character to make it work, I'm happy to talk with my players to actually sort like through that and work that out, and make whatever works, which is how we've ended up with some of the classes that we have ended up with in the end. So yeah, thank you, Queen Zephyr. I appreciate the save. So yes, we've got a Titanborn Asimar Paladin. We have a Raken Urbanite Ranger, which is a raccoon person, so an Urbanite Ranger. We have a Simic Hybrid Alchemist, a Kalishtar Warlock, whose patron is a Great Old One, an Eldritch entity. We have a Spring Eladrin Eloquence Bard, Succubus Soul Warlock, and we have a Sphinx Tabaxi Warlock whose patron, it's called the Pact of the Boogie Woogie Woogie. So yes, we've managed to make a custom class like pact for that. So yes, and yes, I very much appreciate the save, Queen Zephyr, and hello, welcome. I love the way that you and Tide Runner both announce your appearance in my stream with save. At this point, I should have expected it, but yes. It's tradition. Yeah, exactly. And I did see the pictures of your world that you had been working on, Zephyr. It looks really, really good. I think it looks really cool. The placement of the houses is driving you mad. Why do you think I end up... Yeah. I use 3 different stamps for it, which are like these close clusters, then the kind of loose clusters, and then the individual ones. And yeah, a lot. And now you see what takes so long of just like the individual placing of houses, just so they look exactly how you want them to look. Yeah, see, and this is the other thing, going back to your original comment there, Root of All Beers as well. There are some things, there is a lot at the moment that I do not necessarily, I've been really unhappy with some of the things Wizards of the Coast have done in recent publications, and obviously everything that's going on recently. Oh no! Big maps are fun, but I'm sorry that your puppy took a bite of it. Hey, but that could be a really cool thing to work into some kind of lore, though. Everything is inspiration for stories. And yeah, so the other reason I also use the term of species and subraces interchangeably is because a lot of what we're actually seeing in D&D is they are different species. That is the reality of it. And the breakdown of that is if there are different types of genetic presentation in a species, then it becomes kind of like a from a scientific perspective, a subclass of that species. But of course, you don't want to like confuse the matter by referring to it as class. So sub-race is, it kind of works in that particular situation. Because I feel like lineage kind of, for my personal kind of take on that, lineage to me would cover more your background if you were going to look at it that way. Ancestry could work better, I think, than lineage. The biggest capstone here, though, for me is what Wizards chooses to do in their own setting and refer to it in their own setting is completely fine, and that is the essence of the game, that, you know, to a certain degree, you take the things you like and change the things you don't. As long as, and I've always held this kind of belief, as long as what you're doing is not deliberately going out of your way to cause harm to others, that is something that should be taken into consideration. you know. And if somebody turns around to you and points out that they personally are being affected by a choice you've made, then you endeavor to do the best that you can within your ability to correct that. Especially if the what you had done was unintentional because you didn't know. You know, unfortunately, if you don't know, you can't do something about it unless that is communicated. Unless you're like you are aware of it beforehand, you know. We're just kind of talking about the choices of wording and stuff like this, basically, Xanderfell. Ooh. Helps if I turn my phone onto silent, because that is the last thing anyone needs to sleep. Can I sleep? No, Bobicus! Sleep is important, but also as a sufferer of the midnight wanders, I can understand that. There is something about the nighttime in which I find it much easier to create and concentrate myself. So unfortunately, yes, the late night does haunt me occasionally, more often than I would like, let's be honest. It's the 2 a.m. wanders. Well, everyone knows that the 3 a.m., if you can make it to 3 a.m., it's a special time, the witching hour. So yeah, just sometimes you can't sleep. And I get that. Sleep is important. So you kind of take the opportunity when you can and yeah. Rest, look after yourself. Well, I mean, that is one case, but I mean, it depends. For example, I could be really bored, but I tend to be quite a big overthinker. So even if I'm bored, my brain will start running through things in my head that I could have done better, I could have done differently. Just, yeah, constantly thinking about things that I could have done or changed or that kind of stuff. Yeah. See, yeah, I don't have anything like ADHD. It's just, yeah, I tend to be quite a heavy overthinker. Um, a lot of perfectionism and a little side helping of mild anxiety probably doesn't help that. So, for me to actually be able to fall asleep, I am usually at the point where I literally cannot stand anymore. There is nothing I can do to stay awake, and it doesn't matter how much I try to stay awake, I can't stay awake anymore. Numenera, yeah. I need a plot of some variety. Don't we all, Bobicus? I'm kind of a bit in that state myself. I'm like, oh, I've got so much to do before I launch this campaign. And yet there's also a lot of other stuff that I should be doing for like my job and stuff like this. And I'm like, yeah, no, it'll be fine. I can, yeah, I need to create like this, I need to create like a combat or something like this. I know that I've got a combat coming up that I want to, you know, start the potential combat. I say potential combat because it really does depend. The group might decide not to fight after all, so there's nothing I can do about that. But I kind of looked at it and I'm like, oh, you know what I really need to do right now? I want to create like character intros. And then I have to remind myself that has absolutely nothing to do with actually doing, you know, my legitimate work or even my D&D campaign. It's just fluff that I don't actually need to do, but for some reason I really, really, really want to do that. See, I wish my procrastination was a little less you should do this cool thing and more actually procrastinating in a way that will actually help me. Ooh, dungeons are fun. What kind of dungeon is it, Bobicus? I mean, I agree, Xanderfell. Plots can be simple. The problem comes from if you are suffering from writer's block, for example. And I know one of the reasons that I actually enjoy running D&D campaigns is the fact that it is a collaborative story. Funnily enough, I might end up being really stuck on something, and it's only through talking through it with my players that it inspires the story to happen, because I usually end up writing myself into a corner. Ooh, random mechanics for exploration. What kind of random mechanics? See, because so for the previous campaign I had, which had a really strong Necronomicon vibe to it, one of the dungeons that I kind of designed for it was like an Escher style, like, you know, where the world, you can start walking on the walls and it like inverts and all this kind of stuff, and each of those surfaces has its own kind of physics to it, and like trying to figure out how that was going to work for like a combat. Yeah, I really enjoy those. And yeah, theater of the mind, way easier than trying to make a map work for it. No, I don't know it, Tigress, but it sounds amazing. I love that kind of stuff. Sorry, I know that gasp was very extensive. 19th century supernatural mythologica Scandinavia. That sounds so cool. See, that's really cool. I like the tension pull mechanic you've kind of got going on for it. feel like Xanderfell, though, sometimes, like, in general, that's a good concept that, yeah, definitely leave room for the players to make the job bigger than intended, but to have some at least semblance of a guideline for it, it makes it a little harder to do so. I mean, obviously a lot of it does come down to player interaction with it, though. I've had these quests set out that, you know, that I've gone, oh, you know, it's going to have plenty of different ways for them to interact with it and things like this, and they've ended up like solving it faster than I had anticipated, or completely circumventing it, or you've got you've also got the problem that occasionally sometimes players just like straight up ignoring a plot, or they miss something and just don't interact with it. I'm looking for a particular bush if you're wondering what I'm doing. There's one very specific bush that I like using. I think, is it you? Yes. This one, I feel like that's too big. See, I know it's a bush like this. Yeah, amnesia plot lines can be really fun. I usually do also touch back in with the player who has given me the amnesia plot line and actually at least gotten a few clarifications on what they like, on where they would like to kind of foresee the character going. Because at least having those guidelines, you can kind of figure out how far you want to lean into it. Ooh, Scandinavian folklore. Yes. Love it. These are the bushes. I didn't do all the greenery under the buildings over here. Who's the author? Author Tigress. I'll actually a vase, and I feel like that's probably the name. Yeah, I still like to inquire as to like how dark they would like the story to go, whether just a few touchstones. It depends on how much. I suppose that works depending on how much you want to kind of go with the tropes. Like, oh, they were evil or super good, and like the complete antithesis of what they are currently, and things like this. I actually had a previous character that you'll actually get to see in this particular campaign, because they're still intrinsically tied into one of the character stories, because legacy characters, that they had gone through a lot of trauma because of the way that they had grown up, and their previous life as a child prodigy. And the fact is they had to, when they had vanished, they had gone into it knowing that they were going to essentially die that day, and actually managed to circumvent their death in a way. But they couldn't anticipate, when they asked their patron for help, what cost. Well, yeah. See, that can also work Bobicus too, because it meant that somewhere along the way you failed. And the question is, did you fail because of your own hubris, or did you fail because you just weren't strong enough? Someone betrayed you, someone sold you out, or was it a self-sacrifice that you gave up part of who you were? Yeah, Xanderfell, that's exactly why I do at least have some kind of like interim questions about that. Yeah, that's exactly it. Yeah, failed heroes can be a really cool story too, but also the self-sacrificing hero, and finding out that the person that you sacrificed for either betrayed you, or it's either the person you sacrificed it for betrayed you, or because of a you sacrificed yourself and then they double crossed you anyway. The person you were making the deal with, and you still lost the person you cared about. That's also cool. And it goes from learning that you were a hero. Not only that, there was the betrayal, but also then potentially finding out that the person betrayed you was still out there. And uncovering those leaves of the story, they're really, really cool. See, the problem with doing that, Xanderfell, is if someone in the party leaves, you can end up with something in the plot that is intrinsically then essentially turfed because that character is no longer there. So you do try to keep, what I do anyway, is try to keep at least the main plot separate from what the party is doing. But then I give every character their own individual mini plot that's surrounding their own character's growth. And usually I do try to, if possible, I do try to weave some of their stories, like have parts that brush against each other that they have in common. Ooh. Yeah, see, I've heard about Numenera, but I haven't actually seen the rule set for it yet. Just because I haven't got around to looking at it yet. Thank you, Tigress. Yeah, it is very Fae themed, but it's not just that. I do take a lot of reference to real world folklore and mythos anyway, which I already have some Scandinavian folklore actually already tied in the fact that one of the current players in the Tuesday game is actually following a lot of the Njörður and that Norse god kind of plot line. So obviously as well, I tie a lot of my Fae stuff into both Celtic and Norse and a bit of Greek mythos, to be honest. So, because I haven't actually had a look at Numenera yet, Bobicus, what is a glaive and a nano? Because I'm actually kind of interested, because ooh, that's kind of cool. See, because yeah, I'm always interested in having a look at different TTRPGs, because even though I'm running in 5th edition right now, there is a lot of futuristic stuff that I'm pulling into this Saturday campaign. I've used a lot of the ultra modern 5e. Oh, see, that's kind of cool. I like that. I'm going to have to check that out too, Tigress, because it could be very helpful. So thank you. I'm always interested in learning new things. Yeah, so this particular campaign, I've been pulling a lot from the ultra modern now I'm trying to think of the word, supplement, basically, that they've made it to be compatible with 5e. Which has helped, which is how most of my characters do on some level have some kind of firearm or grenade launcher. I do tend to be a very heavy roleplay heavy DM, so in a lot of situations I can tend to be very rules light. So sounds somewhat like a Warforged. Warforged are essentially clockwork automaton kind of things, I believe, but they're meets Cybermen a little bit. Depends on the world lore. My campaign, this particular campaign, doesn't actually have Warforged in it. Oh, it's got flavor texted Warforged. They're called clockwork automatons in my world, because I feel that Warforged are very Eberron specific, and my campaign is taking place in my own world, not Eberron. So I've found ways to make and different lore and mythos for the characters and species in my world, basically. The Jack sounds kind of cool. Like a bard rogue. Yeah. I very heavily play with the rule of cool as well. So in a lot of cases I will let characters try almost anything, you know, within reason. There does have to be a level of I do try to keep a small level of realism, but obviously in a world where magic exists, you know, there still has to be a little bit of suspension of disbelief. I think I'm gonna have to put some gardens in here because I really like the little pops of colour. I mean, you only notice it when you get real close, but I do like the little pops of colour that having the garden beds adds. Fuses flesh and steel, though. Part of that does just make me think a little bit as well of the Cyberman of Doctor Who fame. Just the wording of that, fuses flesh and steel. It's cool, though. So I do like to put this little bit of grass around the buildings as well, just to break up the look of the cobblestone and things like that. A Nycthemeron. What is a Nycthemeron? That Nichthemeron? I don't know how to pronounce that, but it sounds cool. Ripped apart. Jeez, that's brutal. Ah, cool. This is true, all because of the damn fire dancer. Look, he is a sound business investment to her. Yes, your character's brother is, he is a sound business investment for that fire dancer. Yeah, there's always that. There is something that was the source of his power that was removed from him. Very, what's his name? Biblical hero, Samson. Very Samson. When Delilah cut his hair and reduced his power. Kind of begs the question, especially about some of these created heroes. What are they without their power? And having for them to basically relearn that they are more than just their power. To quote Encanto, you're more than just your gift, but are they aware of that? And I suppose that there is I feel like, thank you, Tigress, I will definitely save. I feel like that's a little bit, the new Puss in Boots movie is a little bit like that as well. Insofar as, you know, do they know who they are without the thing that seemed to make them special? Can they still be a hero? Did they remember what it was like to start out? Well, it's the concept, Xanderfell, of are you a hero because of all the magical items and armor and everything you have accumulated, or are you a hero because you'll do something regardless of those things? Would you still continue to be a hero even if you didn't have the magical armor, the magical weapons, the substantial power given to you by your patron? Will you still continue to do the right thing and fight for justice and protect people, even if you don't have those things anymore, even if you've been significantly. Yeah, exactly. Yes, The Book of Life is a brilliant movie. Well, and that's the thing with the amnesia plotline, though, of as they learn more about their great deeds and things like this, and they finally figure out who they are. Exactly. Are you a hero if you don't have those things that you think make you a hero? More specifically, it's always, you lose sight of the fact of what made you a hero in the first place. And I believe the other guy in that book, in that story, Zephyr, he was a hero by accepting that he was not like the rest of his family. He had to do it. He had to do things his own way to prove he was a hero. And, and that meant going against his family's wishes and against his family's reputation. Yeah, exactly. Zephyr. Yeah. And that's the thing, like, if you lose that part of yourself that you think makes you a hero, like through, and you see this a lot. It is a trope that you do see a lot in hero movies, where the hero ends up getting injured or something, and all of a sudden they learn that fear. I think they did that with the Hulk as well, that he had his ass handed to him, and he was really scared. He didn't want to fight. Like, the Hulk didn't want to fight. The big guy didn't want to fight because he was scared. And I really like that concept that sometimes, like, yeah, are you a hero because you have the power, or are you a hero regardless of it? Yeah, they do it to a lot of heroes because it is a really good hero trope that makes the hero question. Yeah, it's effective because it makes the hero question whether they are truly a hero, or are they only a hero because of the thing that they think makes them heroic. And if they didn't have that thing anymore, would they still be a hero? I think it's more he learned humility more than he stopped being a hero. Like, because Thor was still a hero even after he lost Mjolnir. Like, he still did heroic things. But when faced with loss, he kind of lost. Like, he was still a hero. He was still strong. He didn't need any of that. He knew he didn't need any of that to be a hero. It's just, he had his confidence shaken. He thought he was unbeatable. Yeah. And it's funny you say the word worthy there, Zephyr, because that is actually a concept that I'm going to be playing with in this campaign. What defines worthy? basically. Because some of the items that they're going to be going after in this particular story is going to be determined if they are worthy to wield the power. But and the question there is, well, who defines what is worthy? And there is a level that it is the magic items in question that will be deciding, like the magic itself that will be deciding who is worthy. But what will be shaken here is what their concept of worthy is. Because is worthy good, or is worthy just, actually fulfilling these arbitrary rules of who can wield something? So, for example, one of the things that they're kind of going to be searching for in this particular game, for example, is the metaphysical principle of creation. Well, what makes you worthy of wielding creation? Because inherently, with these metaphysical principles that are going to be essentially what they're going to be fighting for, worthiness isn't dictated whether you're good or evil. Because it's going to be toying with the idea that the actual God, the true gods of the world, don't require belief to exist. And therefore, it's not that they're apathetic and they don't care about the world. It's just their viewpoint on what is important is very vastly different to what, for example, the ascended gods do. Because the ascended gods were once human, or once mortal, should I say. But I also think it comes down to what you're competing for to prove your worthiness, basically. Because, for example, if it is a death item, proving that you're worthy, like, what is the goal there to prove you're worthy to wield something that is, for example, Death's Scythe? And that's where it comes down to being circumstantial, I think. See, here's the thing though. Death doesn't necessarily have to be a concept, because even if we look at mythos, there are good and evil death gods. So the question is death a manifestation of a necessary step in the world, or is it, or is it the absence of life, or is it the void, and this is where all of these concepts start to come into play. And because this is obviously a massive element of this particular campaign that I'm running, they all of a sudden become very prominent questions in my particular campaign. Yeah, see, Tigress, I've had the benefit in this particular setting to be able to play around with the deities of the world to the point that there have been a number of different entities and deities within this particular setting now. So getting to play around with that. And this is where these gods of these metaphysical principles come in, because they are very much like that. They don't necessarily fight other gods. They are just what is deemed as the true gods of this world. They are essentially the principles of the universe, and they have manifested, this being. And if they do create physical manifestations of themselves, so avatars, that is what they do in their time when they are bored. They put a physical manifestation of themselves into the world to just interact with the world, but not because they themselves need it. And because of that, they can be very ambivalent towards the religious orders and things like this. But the question then comes from because we've had draconic gods as well and things like this. Elemental draconic gods were the ones who actually created the world. Well, the question then comes to them of, well, if you require belief to exist, is that the imposition of metaphysical order then, as in a way to control things? And yes, I actually have a couple of characters who are in the Tuesday game who are not happy with the way that the gods control and manipulate things. So yes, we do have a couple of player characters who are very much on the we are going to take down the gods. So I can't say I have, Xanderfell. Yeah, the question is, do you attempt to take out the gods, or do you just attempt to make it so that they can't interact with the universe the way that they want to? I find that playing an atheist in a polytheistic world, especially a world, well, I can't speak for all D&D worlds, I can only speak on behalf of my own, but because the gods are so prominent in the world, having and they do actively, interact with the world, it doesn't really make sense to be an atheist in my worlds. Because there are quite a number of people in the pantheon to choose from, depending on your own personal kind of beliefs. So yeah, being an atheist in my world is kind of silly, especially because the likelihood that you are going to interact with a god at some point is actually quite high. The gods in my world aren't necessarily so ridiculously hands off. We're going to actually see a lot less of that in this campaign because of the effects of the merge. So this will be interesting for me. Yeah, exactly. I think it works in a setting, Tigress, when the gods are less obviously walking around. So that's an interesting theory, Xanderfell. I think in a lot of situations, evil is very much identifiably a choice. And what we end up seeing a lot of what my experience of what I see played out by people in campaigns is evil is actually very much a choice. You are actively choosing to do something that you know is going to cause significant harm. Not just significant harm, but significant harm that essentially you are able to get away with and market as a story as, look at what wonderful heroes we are. I've had plenty of parties who have gone, yeah, but we're the good guys. And, it does then, and this is where obviously I do run morally grey, a lot of morally grey bad guys. Because usually they are making terrible choices, but they are justifying their reasons for doing it. They have justification. And a lot of the time it's the party going, yeah, but you're evil because everybody around you believes that what you are doing is evil. And a lot of the times the bad guys in my world are like, yes, but I'm doing it for these people. Like, unfortunately, sometimes being a hero sometimes means making a hard choice. And we do kind of play around with that a lot in my campaigns. Yeah, and there's the difference, Zephyr. Knowing the gods exist and worshipping them is two very different concepts. But because the world is polytheistic, not every god is going to demand devotion of every single person. Thank you for the follow, Aldice. It is wonderful to have you here. Welcome to the stream. Yeah. See, and generally, well, it is also fun playing the standard chaotic, evil bad guys as well, who are just evil because they are evil. Through madness, through greed, through, there is no rhyme or reason to why they are being evil beyond they enjoy crushing their enemies underfoot. And they enjoy savoring their pain and panic. Chaotic evil are really interesting bad guys because they cannot be reasoned with. And it is very fun to put chaotic evil. Oh, see, that sucks. Yeah, it sucks that they never got to finish it. But yeah, because and they can be really good bad guys to throw against the party as well, because sometimes parties forget that an option in combat is legitimately to retreat. See, that's pretty cool. Yeah, there are a lot of really good anime and manga out there that make you think. See, that's pretty cool. They're not all floating above each other. They're kind of a set of islands that are all. They were originally one landmass, and when the meteor hit, it changed the physics of the actual land masses, and they rose into the air very. So yeah, they are the floating islands, and these are, I believe, these are all connected still. They're just very chipped and broken into pieces, and they are floating above a market that has been built below it so that they have easy trade with outsiders and things like this. Yes, there is actually something special about the meteor. The meteor actually ties heavily into my specific world lore for the Kalishtar in this world. The meteor was actually the last remnants of the so the Kalishtar in my world, the quarry spirits, are actually aliens from their planet called Dalquor. And the meteor, this particular meteor that hit was their prison moon, their sentient prison moon that had orbited their planet. It had been knocked out of orbit when the draconic god of greed basically consumed their planet. And so it got knocked out of orbit and it traveled through space and it actually hit the world. Releasing all of the dark quarry that had been imprisoned within, which led to the rise of the third era of the world that the Necronomicon story took place in. The Kalishtar, the light Kalishtar, the good Kalishtar, quarry spirits that created the Kalishtar, should I say, they had... When their planet had been destroyed, they had actually managed to traverse the astral plane and the plane of dreams and things like this to make it to this part of the world where they had established a foothold and created their small community and obviously created the Kalishtar. And there had been some dark ones in their community then, but no, this was entirely the worst of their worst, basically. So I straight up forgot what I was looking for then for a second. And so, yes, it had shown up in this world, and the Dark Quarry that had already been here for generations had already been trying their experiments with eugenics to essentially create the perfect host, because the Dark Quarry, unlike the Light Quarry who could create Kalishtar because it was a shared bond, the Dark Quarry straight up needed hosts. But they had a very specific demographic that they essentially needed to kind of, yeah. Very demonic in that nature, but they are very much creatures of the plane of dreams. They are your nightmares. They are your nightmares. They are all of those kind of creatures. But they are also a possessive species. Unlike demons, though, who can make deals. So I use demons and devils kind of interchangeably in my system, in my games, because I have made the abyss part of my hells. Just kind of like in the deeper, darker reaches and things like this. And so there is that potential, yes. But so they needed very specific hosts, though, which is the combination of angelic blood, human blood, and demonic, which, of course, is a very hard, broad spectrum to be able to achieve. And so they had been basically undertaking experiments of eugenics for like 50,000 years before the Starfall. So yeah, they'd been undertaking eugenics testing for years, basically, trying to create the perfect host. And by the time that their moon basically hit the world, they had almost everything in place to help, because these Dark Quarry spirits, they had actually, and the nightmares that they kind of commanded, had actually aligned themselves with an entity known as the Titan King, who was an eldritch deity, in which I took some inspiration from this, for this, a lot from Greek mythos, with a bit of Greek mythos, a bit of the Christian kind of mythos, that essentially this entity who became known as the Titan King believed that he was actually supposed to eventually be the new head god of the Pantheon. And when the old Empyrean head of the Pantheon basically refused to hand over his rule, thank you for the stretch, by the way, when he refused to hand over his rule, he basically gathered together all his followers and tried to overthrow him, in which he lost. And he and those who had supported him were imprisoned. But before he was imprisoned, he had gone. This entity had gone to the goddess of magic of the time. Well, she's still the goddess of magic. She's one of the main deities that hasn't actually changed. And her name is Amaya Hayden. She's like the Amaya Hayden, the Whisper in the Stars, or something like this, without having it directly in front of me. And he had basically said to her, I know that I'm going to lose this coming battle, but I want you to make it possible for me to return one day when it is finally time for my rule over this earth. And she goes, yeah, no probs. I'll do that for you, buddy. So she wrote, thank you, Xanderfell. I was just doing it. So thank you. So basically, she turned around to him and said, yeah, I can write this book for you. And she wrote it, but she also wrote the caveat into it that she didn't tell him about, that it would be up to the people of the world to decide if they truly wanted him to rule. So basically, she decreed that they would find the book, but that she also gave them the power and the answers to be able to stop him, which is exactly what happened in the previous campaign that led to the previous campaign that came before this one. Those Empyrean gods and things like this, the greatest thing about having the world lore in this particular world that spans centuries is the fact that, so things that are known within the world for my players, for the Tuesday group, for example, they know somewhere along the way the Empyrean gods were replaced. The thing is, we don't know the story of how that happened. And so that's the story that they're getting to tell. You know, if that's what they wanted to do, they wanted to stop the gods, they are capable of doing so. But because that part of the story, I haven't fleshed that part of the story out, it means that there is so much room for what they can do. It is not indicative of, like, it is not decided upon by a previous campaign. This is literally their campaign. They can do what they want without being affected by the decisions of another campaign within the world. And so, you know, and that's also what they get to see in the Saturday campaign, that even though some of these things have been already seen, already done, already spoken about, because it is not inherently set in stone yet, the story is theirs to tell. And even like things that are happening in the Tuesday game, because there is like 50,000 years between the Tuesday campaign and what is going to now be the Saturday campaign, those two stories aren't inherently going to influence each other. And that being said, there is actually a character who is a time traveler in the world. And so this particular character, the character of Crisis, who is going to be playing in the Saturday campaign and played by the wonderful Rosewood, his character Roland, who is going to be Crisis in this campaign, has actually been in all but the first era of the world. His story has literally followed and kind of amalgamated to what is going to be, like, this is this character's final story in this world that is being told for him. And he's given that character a bit of a amnesia plotline too. Yes and no, Tigress. There's actually a mix. We've got a couple of new players and we've got a couple of older players. So Valcor, who is playing the Rayken Ranger, he's in the Tuesday campaign, which is 50,000 years in the past. But he didn't play in the previous campaign that preceded this one. Both Tide Runner and Tyrant Dungeon, who are playing the Simic Hybrid Alchemist, he's actually playing his previous character's great-grandson. And Tyrant Dungeon is playing, who's playing the Tabaxi Warlock, he's actually playing his straight-up character's son, should I say. So they're legacy characters, but they have their own story that they're telling for their new characters. Like, enough time has passed. It's like it's been 1,000 years for these characters. So the world is different even from when their previous characters had been in the world. And then we have Zedjan, who is one of the Kalishtar in this. And he is a new player coming in. But the way that I'm kind of getting around the fact that there are some people who have been in the world, and there is an excessive amount of world lore. And the way that I'm kind of getting around that is basically I'm pairing everyone up. It's a party of 6 at the moment. Anyone could have joined Xanderfell. A few weeks ago, I actually back in December, I actually did put out the call, opening it up to anyone who wanted to apply. And yeah, I was taking applications from anyone who had heard about it. Obviously, the campaign was up on Roll20, so anyone could have stumbled across it as well. Because yes, I was looking for, in the end, I was looking for 2 new players. After I had spoken to some of my players that I already had. So I was looking for, 2 new players. And yeah, I had interviews and all that kind of stuff. So, yeah. I don't actually have I don't have a strict rule on, not being able to speak English fluently, things like this. The understanding is, if English isn't your first language, there is going to be misunderstandings. Hilariously, and I know that this isn't even in that same wheelhouse, but the fact is, most of my players are Australian. However, we do have an American and a British player, and it's just interesting because sometimes the American players don't quite understand what the Australians are saying. Even though we're all speaking English, obviously regionality does play a huge difference in this. And yeah, no, everybody has an equal chance in my campaigns with the application processes. Yeah, I know, because it all comes down to the changes here. Because every time I'm lifting the mouse to, because I try not to do single lines, because I don't want it, if I make one mistake and then I have to delete it, Control Z it, I don't necessarily want to undo all the work I've done. But yeah, so there's already 400 changes I'll put in it, which when I'm doing this, I'll usually save a bit more than asking you guys to use up all your channel points. So, but yeah, so my application process for future campaigns and things like this, for anyone who wants to know, usually on my when I put the application out, I will have a campaign application, and usually I ask things like name, age, and just a few questions like, have you played in TTRPGs before? Are you interested in learning? I tell you my time zone and when my games will be, what time my games will be, because obviously that can be a huge impact, because obviously I'm in Australia and my games usually end up being, if we're going by American standards, it can be anywhere between 3 to 5 a.m. for America. Yeah. And see, we have real issues with time zones in Australia for obvious reasons. Even for the Australian players, we have issues with time zones because daylight savings happens. And so, for example, people from New South Wales and Melbourne, they are half an hour ahead of me. I'm in South Australia. They're half an hour ahead of me. But Queenslanders don't have daylight savings. So the problem comes, the problem can come if, for example, like I said, for Americans to play with us, it's anywhere between 3 and 5 a.m. Of course you would say that, Zephyr. But yeah, but I mean, again, it's not up to me to dictate whether your time zone works for play or not, because you have to be the one that adheres to it. And yeah, just a few obligatory questions. Depending on if I'm running a standard style campaign, but usually I used to ask for a character concept, but this time around with this campaign, I didn't, just because there is so much customizable choice for the characters. I didn't want to basically ask for a concept, then be married to the concept, and not want to change it after they'd seen all of the stuff, so this time around I didn't ask for it. But then and one of the things I ask as well is using 3 words, how would you describe yourself? Just because it's a question in there. Yeah, they can be, Tigress. And then if you are successful, you'll get a message. Well, regardless of whether you're successful or not, even at that level of the application process, I message everybody, regardless of if you got in or not. I will let you know, even if you didn't get in, just because I believe that is polite. And yeah, that is one thing that I have maintained through all of my campaigns, that regardless of whether you get in or not, I will always let you know. Just because it is the worst, just waiting and hanging out to see if you got in and then never hearing back. That's just what I do. And then those that got into the in for an interview, I will interview them. Usually, if I've already got players in the game, I will usually interview in a group interview with the players, so they can kind of get to know them, get a vibe for them, because they obviously have to play with them. And then, yeah, going from there, I basically talk with the existing players, see who they liked, and we basically choose together. Okay. Yeah. I suppose the hardest thing is literally just the biggest thing is obviously when, having my interviews and things like this with players is I have some very strong standpoints on certain things, which are not the things that you would expect. Like, for example, I don't have like a long laundry list of rules when it comes to server behavior. It is basically overarching, basically be a decent human being, i.e. if you wouldn't say it to somebody in real life, don't say it over the internet. Yeah, see that can be a good thing. I would much prefer you to create a character that fits within the world. One thing that kind of really frustrates me is when somebody turns around and says that they want to see what other people have made for their character before they decide, because they want to fit a specific function in the group. I would prefer, first and foremost, because I am a very roleplay heavy, obviously lore heavy, narrative heavy DM, I would prefer you to play a character. Oh, no, we're Australian. Expect that there is going to be cursing in my campaign. From me as well. I will say that. Yeah, I will say that. And I will say as well, like, there can be a lot of dirty jokes and things like this, but yeah. Yes, there is a lot of context in that word in Australia, and it can mean so many things. Hi, Cleric in a Box. How are you? Welcome. You do good. Well, that is good. I would say. Ooh, D&D later tonight. You know what? Valcor, poor Valcor. So, very shortly, in the next 2 weeks, I'm actually coming back to all my... most of my campaigns, all 2 of them, are coming back in about 2 weeks. And poor Valcor, he is jonesing hard for them to come back. Yeah, he misses our D&D campaigns. A dwarven... Of course they did. Why does that not surprise me, Zephyr? I've actually been really, really well, Cleric. I'm slowly getting on top of all my work. Am I any closer to actually starting this campaign? I would like to say yes. But not as close as I would like to be, unfortunately. I've got a lot of work to do before I am ready to launch in 2 weeks. Okay, so I have a problem though that can I... There we go. Flattened it to the background. Keep that nice and clear. It would be really funny, Zephyr, if at one of these times, the only evidence left at the scene of the crime is a signal whistle. I'm not going to say what to do with it, because obviously I wouldn't want to, you know, coerce any players or anything like this. But just a signal whistle. Yeah, see, Xanderfell, that stuff doesn't bother to me. I've had parties of, like with this particular party that is going to be playing in this campaign, there are going to be at least 4 vaguely referenced inferred clerics. And that's okay. Because, warlocks. Because at the end of the day, all warlocks are really different, and it's the same. I've had a party with 4 clerics, all different domains, and I think that's what comes down to. Even if you have characters that have the same domain, you will never see it presented the same way. Everyone plays their characters differently, so it doesn't matter so much to me about party versatility in that. Interesting. Trying to think of some encounters for a spellcaster trying to cast Hallow in the area. I don't think Hallow affects giants and dragons though. So is it one of the party members trying to cast it, or... See, I didn't know that about Pathfinder because, again, I'm not overly familiar with Pathfinder rules yet. I am in the process of having a read and learn about it, though, just to see the options that are out there. Oh, that's kind of cool. Dragon blooded. How big are these dragon bloods? That's usually a good place to start. And also, how big are the giants? Because, I mean, trying to cast anything where there's any kind of fighting going on, let's be honest, that's already difficult. Don't say that, Tigress. Everybody does different things, and what it kind of comes down to as well is what's important to you. Like, I do know in talking to Zephyr the other night, Zephyr was putting in like bench seats, and they were like, no one's going to be able to see them, but I'll know they're there. Oh, see, that's cool. That's cool, Zephyr. Power related to the waves. Basically, you put the bits and pieces in that you kind of like, and part of the reason I put in these little flower beds, Tigress, because it just adds little pops of color on a really tiny basis. Like, yeah, unfortunately, I'm very detail orientated in that kind of regard, and I just want it to look cool. I did remember, though, that I wanted to do something cool. Thank you, Evil. I'll do a save for you. And Gengar! We love Gengar. Okay, well, already one start. Dodging fireballs while trying to cast a ritual that takes time. That's one thing. That's the easy, lazy one, though. Sylph drew it up. That's cool. I've seen some very interesting things about that. Ah, thank you, Xanderfell. I will write that down. Dromark Health, a bugbear tavern owner. Just quickly writing that down. You're holding onto your power. Thank you, Zephyr. I just had to run off to grab some water for that. So thank you, Zephyr. I do very much appreciate it. Yeah, that can definitely make sense, I suppose, Vandersel. Yes. Drinking too much of anything would probably be a bad thing, but yes, especially if it has venom in it. A posture check. Thank you again. In every time you guys redeem a posture check, by the way, I will always say my chiropractor thanks you, because he does. I know. We have the Purple Heart competition. Thank you for all the love. I appreciate and love your support. Thank you. Could have sworn there was a flower one, and I wonder if I'm missing it. I think it's this one. More saturated. No, I definitely want the saturation up. Don't want it to be too bright. Aww. Well, know that I care and appreciate all of the chat, so thank you. For those who managed to catch it as well, did you enjoy the Among Us? Or would you would you like to see more of the Among Us with the whole the whole mod team and players and all that kind of stuff? Because it is a combination of essentially the whole creative team from between Evil One's channel and my own, so... I certainly enjoyed it. Not the false Hydra. That's one of Tidrunner's favourite monsters. It can get hot. It's I think it's been around the 30 to 40, 35 to 40 degree market lately, which is actually quite cool for an Australian summer, let's be honest. The frog hemoth, yes. I used the frog hemoth in the previous campaign for, I believe, Biatus, the god of forgetfulness, essentially. He was a giant frog. And the party had to get the bile stone from his stomach. They weren't really sure what to make of his church of followers, though, I will say that. They were super happy. And super helpful, too. Yeah, tonight is rather cool. It has actually been, which is really unusual for an Australian summer. But I have a feeling it has a lot to do with the El Nino events. We've had a lot of those recently over the last year. So, and especially around this time of year, we've actually had a lot of events. So we've actually had a lot of like late season rain and flooding in Australia at the moment. I don't remember the sun. No, Tigress! Yeah, beach at Christmas. It depends if you want to deal with all the people, but because a lot of people go to the beach around Christmas and on Christmas Day and things like this. So it can get very crowded. But yeah, no, we kind of change it up with a lot of the foods we have at Christmas time too. So for some people, a lot of people, we do see a lot of the standard style English roast kind of situation. See, Xanderfell, this is the thing about the the whole thing about, oh, everything in Australia will kill you kind of stuff. We have they're not as bad as you think. They're not as widespread as you think. I mean, the hardest part is a lot of them are very small. Like, it's actually the snakes and the spiders that you kind of have to be most worried about. But even then, we, like, through a combination of, like, sheer Australian stupidity, let's be honest, and, you know, it's such a part of, because they're obviously something we grew up with and part of our culture, there's, like, a lot of things that we just don't really, you either really mess around with it because, you know, why not, we laugh in the face of death, or you're just taught even from a very young age just not to mess with certain things because, you know, death is a permanent situation. Yeah, redback spiders and brown snakes, but you just kind of learn things like, for example, you never just pick up a can. Yeah, don't approach the kangaroos. As long as you give the kangaroos kind of like walk slowly around them and don't panic, kangaroos generally won't bother you. I say generally because there is always the exception to the rule, obviously, that the territorial male kangaroos. But beyond that, yeah. Blue ring octopus. Cassowary is really, again, really in the bush, and usually up towards Queensland. They're actually not as, like, a lot of the times you won't even see them, and you won't find them in cities, no. Even emus, generally, as long as you kind of, like, our wildlife is very much like the Australian attitude, really, I suppose, which is, hey, man, you don't mess with us, we won't mess with you. Just kind of chill out, leave us alone. The only time funnily enough, one of the birds that you do actually get kind of iffy around, and it's mostly in spring. Magpies, yes. Magpies are the one that we actually do not like the least. And you get a lot of that and plovers. Oh, really? Yeah, but you're also like in the Hunter Valley Mountains countryside. Yeah, magpies. You wouldn't think that magpies would be as big of a deal as they are. But no, they are. Like, they are as much of a problem as you think they are. And see, magpies aren't very big. And they're not even really deadly. See, yeah, Xanderfell, you've got a lot of big predators. We don't. Do we have any, big predators? I mean, dingoes, I guess. Yeah, we've got dingoes. But I don't think we've really got any large predators. And generally, a dingo is like a wild dog. Kind of the size of... trying to think of a comparative size that they would be. Because they're bigger than coyotes. I'm trying to think of an average sized dog. Like a blue heeler sized dog. Kind of like a coyote, but bigger. Like, in terms of stockier. They kind of look... They look like a regular ass dog, first of all. Kind of like the colouring of like a golden retriever, but relatively shortish fur, like a blue heeler or a kelpie. And yeah, they look like friendly doggos. And generally, again, they're actually pretty friendly. We'll leave you most of the time alone, unless, you know, there are really dire circumstances, like they have young, or they're particularly like starving. But most of the time, yeah, no, they'll just leave you alone. And that is, yeah, they behave very similar to wolves in that regard, except they sleep a lot. Yeah, they can't actually. Yeah, in terms of behavior, they behave a lot like wolves, except not the howling thing. Dingoes don't howl. They're more like a deserty kind of dog. We have wild horses. We also have a lot of wild camels as well. They tend to be pretty bad, like pretty deadly if given the opportunity. We got a lot of rabbits. See, this is the thing. People think that Australia has a lot of these really terrifying. We have a lot of foxes. Foxes are an introduced species in Australia, so yeah, the British brought them over to us. So we do have foxes. Kind of similar size to the red fox, I guess. We don't have anything like raccoons at all. Actually, that's not true. We've got possums. And possums can be terrifying. They make a lot of noise. They're just little shits, to be honest. Especially because we have a lot of corrugated tin roofs and things like that, and they make one hell of a racket. Yeah, they're angry little things. Possums are angry, man. I'm just trying to think of like the equivalent that we have in Australia, because we don't really have anything like bears. Like we have koalas, and I will say koalas, koalas most of the time, like, yeah, everyone thinks koalas are like hilarious and adorable. No, they're angry. They're angry. That they are stoned a lot of the time. Yeah, no, koalas are stoned a lot of the time on eucalyptus oil, which is basically their whole diet. But yes, they can get very territorial. Wombats as well, like the hairy-nosed wombat is actually huge, and they're solid muscle. They are known for, if you hit them with like a big truck or something, you will roll the truck. Yeah, see, no, the possums in Australia, we have a couple of different varieties of possums. Everything from the ringtail possum, which is actually kind of small, and they're kind of cute looking, right up to the grey possum. And those guys are mean and angry. We also have a lot of bats as well. Which one is so wrong? Which part is wrong? You're about to tell me. Yeah, no, in Australia, that they'll beat you up and take your lunch money. Possums in Australia. Yeah, not very friendly. Koalas, I think that's one of the biggest misconceptions. Yeah, koalas can be not very friendly. But yeah, both koalas and wombats bite. Kangaroos, again, most of the time will leave you alone. Emus will leave you alone. And yeah, most of the snakes and spiders and stuff like this, they're not, in Australia, a lot of them aren't actually very aggressive. Yeah, the opossums, I will agree, the opossum, yeah. But yeah, I've just realised this whole section now annoys me because all the buildings are in the same positioning, and I didn't like that. I'm just trying to think what else. What else do we have? Because yeah, most of the snakes and stuff in Australia aren't particularly aggressive. There are a couple that are, but generally from a really young age. See, we don't have an equivalent of we don't really have an equivalent of the raccoon, but we have the white ibis, which we do refer to as a bin chicken. And I mean, the hilarious part is a lot of American kids nowadays, Xanderfell, are actually learning more about Australia and Australian culture thanks to the wonderful export that is Bluey. There's a lot of concepts in Bluey that a lot of we're starting to see a lot of Americans pick up, kids pick up certain words that we say. I know that they've taken on that language. No, we have, Bluey, spelled Bluey. She is a blue healer. She lives with her family. Think kind of like Peppa Pig, but better. She has a little sister called Bingo. She lives with her parents, Bandit and Chili. All the characters in it are dogs. And it is a wonderfully created kids show. And I'm not just saying that because I'm a parent and my kids love it. It actually, even as an adult watching it, there are some. It is a really good. It is a really good storyteller. And in terms of Iberian lynxes, we don't really have anything like that, Tigress. We have feral cats, which are like domestic house cats that have gotten out and have eventually gone on bred and gone feral, basically. Yes, Bluey. Bluey is amazing. And just some of the concepts and stories they put in it, not just from the perspective of like it being a kid show. They put some really, really good storytelling in it. Yeah, really good storytelling in it, essentially. Which, and not only that, in some particular parts of it, they do actually deal with some pretty significant storylines in how to deal with stuff. And not just from like, but not in a way that's like dumbing it down, if that makes sense. It would depend. Because we've got pretty big bugs here too. I mean, in terms of like Southern America and things like this, you've got a lot of your poison frogs and things like that. Which I don't think we have a lot of poison frogs in Australia. We've got a lot of green tree frogs. Cane toads. Ugh, the cane toad. Don't remind me. Yeah, I can understand that. I know that there are, for example, in Australia, we don't have anything like the hamster in terms of domesticated pets. We do have the desert jumping mouse. Yeah, Australia has to be really strict on that kind of stuff. And I know that obviously there are a lot of illegal kind of things as well, Xanderfell, but for example, we don't have an equivalent of the hamster here. Yeah, hamsters are not allowed because we have a huge native mice population. Not just native mice, but we're also talking like obviously the common house, grey house mouse, which, you know, is obviously a pest. But we also have a lot of native mice as well. So, and in Australia, I mean, just like any area that mice can exist, if a hamster got out, it would be Who needs them? We have the quokka. This is true. If you have never seen a picture of a quokka, they are the cutest, happiest looking marsupial in the world. Yeah, see, we have scorpions in Australia in some of the desert regions, but they're not very big. And we don't generally see scorpions in the city either. But yes, we have the quokka, we have the bilby, which are all native. One of the last big predators Australia had, which is still believed to be extinct, I believe, is the thylacine, which is what people would refer to as the Tasmanian tiger. Yeah. So yes, we've also got the Tassie Devil. Yeah, the Tassie Devil is something else. Yeah, the devils are still around. They are becoming, I think they are endangered though, because they don't, fun fact, they don't get along very well with each other. And part of the reason, for anyone who doesn't know, obviously, if you've seen, it's Warner Brothers, right? Tassie Devil. Yeah, so everyone would, I feel like, know of Tassie Devil thanks to that. But they're actually small, they're black, and they got their name because at night, just the way that they communicate, they sound like a demon has come out of hell and is chasing you. Yeah, there's an infection going through the population. Yeah. Yeah, see, I would say our wombats are like a badger. Yeah, those sounds, they are terrifying. Yeah, that is true. But when we say that, it's not the kind that's transferable to humans. So, because I know that was something that was something that was a bit of a scare tactic that was put out there about the koalas. See, we even have a penguin population in Australia. Even though we don't necessarily get ridiculously cold, we actually get some warm dwelling penguins, and we call them fairy penguins. They're a small type of penguin similar to an Adelie in terms of size. I'm enjoying this, talking about Australian animals. Trying to disprove the myth that it's terrifying here, because the fact is our wildlife, I feel like our wildlife over here gets a bit of a bad rap, purely because obviously so for example, the platypus is actually poisonous. For anyone that doesn't know, the platypus is poisonous and it glows in the dark. Only the males, yes. Only the males are poisonous. But yeah, they glow in the dark. And they do sweat milk. Which is kind of weird. Yeah, the platypus.
You're talking like you think you're royalty. You think that I'm afraid, but I don't break. I heard you question my stability. You think I'll fall just like a guillotine, but I am here to stay. Won't look away. Storm is coming, so you better start running. No, you can't control, feel it in my bones. I'm coming for the, coming for the. Coming for the throne.
Hello. Oh God, that's a name that I'm going to have to struggle to say. Le Creux du Vux. Hello. No, not at all. I have been well. I have been well. And yes, I am doing some map building. We're talking about Australian animals and wildlife while also talking about, you know, the US animals and wildlife and comparisons and things like this and other animals around the world. So welcome. Crew, thank you. Take some pity on the poor Australian. I mean, I know our accent is not always easy to pronounce, but thank you. Thank you for the follow. Yes, I partake in usually map building here for my tabletop game that I'm launching here in a couple of weeks on the 4th of February. And yeah, I am currently going to be running the system in 5th edition. So it is a homebrewed world. So yeah, I basically take the time out to chill out and create maps over here. And of course, everybody is welcome to come in and have a chat. And occasionally I, you know, play some Xbox games and things like that. But mostly it is map building. Yes, Evil One, but you got to just type it. So, what brings you about this neighborhood? Society building tips. Ooh. I mean, I'm trying to think about how I've done things in the past. It has kind of ended up being a gradual build, insofar as I generally only create what the players interact with, at least at the interim. But obviously that was originally how I started. And I started with loose concepts for each of the parts of the world, because originally the world didn't look like this. This is post Starfall, which was an apocalyptic event that changed the shape of the world, and that was divided up into different lands that were created by different elemental draconic gods. So originally they were like, and I hadn't seen Avatar: The Last Airbender before I created this, so it just ended up being a coincidence. That was the Earth Realm, Air Realm, Water Realm, and Fire Realm. And basically they had different species that pertain to each area, region, and I kind of looked at different regions and I kind of but that's where the improv comes in, Xanderfell. And crew, yeah. You know what? though starting at that point though, and just like starting in a tiny part like that, that can be some of the most fun things, because yeah, you don't know what the players are going to interact with. I mean, I do have a tendency to build my big ass world maps first, just as a general rule, and then I kind of look at regions and things like this. So the current world that I'm actually running in, so if I just do a quick pan over each of the different maps that will be in this world, you know, to get to this point, it's been 6 years, and in that time I've had a number of different parties that have played in the world. And you know, the first campaign, they didn't even get into the Fire Realm, so we didn't look at the culture. But then the new Tuesday group, they started in the Fire Realm, so we kind of like fleshed that out. And I looked at the different species as well that I was allocating to certain that had been created by certain gods, because that's where the basis was. By deciding on the pantheon and how the world was going to be created, meant that I also had to create, you know, custom creationism rules, i.e., because each part of the world had been created by a specific god that ruled over a specific element, and they created each of their territories, I suppose, that were unique to them. It meant that certain gods created certain species and subraces. And then, you know, I would look at, okay, well, what cultures, like what mythos is there out for different particular gods? And I didn't necessarily want to use pre-existing Wizards of the Coast god names and things like this. So, you know, I then had to figure out, hello, Elsage, welcome. Yeah, so I had to then start figuring out, okay, well, and this is where my love of mythology and folklore and stuff comes in, because I don't necessarily want it just to depict like this Western culture, but I also wanted them to have, you know, I wanted it to feel like a fleshed out world. And, you know, so obviously I would look a lot into the cultures around, especially since a lot of the existing species that are offered by Wizards of the Coast and D&D, a lot of them are pre-existing monsters or creatures and creations. So for example, the Minotaur, you know, ideally comes from Greek mythos. So then that meant that I started to do a deep dive into Greek mythos, Greek culture, and I will almost always rely heavily on mythos and folklore. I have a lot of gods at this point, Xanderfell. A lot of gods. And that tends to happen though as well, as a world goes through variations on polytheism as well, unless you're going to do a completely atheistic world. Because what people will generally do, especially if you look at old polytheistic cultures, we would start to see the rise of more and more gods as certain domains would need to be covered. And so where I would start mine is I would look at all of the playable cleric domains and then figure out a god for each domain. I would probably say I easily have as many as the Forgotten Realms. And on top of that, now we come around to the fourth era of this world that this game is going to take place in. And now the gods are the Ascended gods, which are previous player characters who did gain ascendancy through their acts of heroism, but also by the nature of their birth. Basically, they do actually have very strong ties to the celestial bloodlines, due to the fact that their bloodlines, so they are entities known as the Realm Witches, which are kind of like the Greek heroes, who are purported to have. Thank you for the naming of business. I will write that down. You'd be surprised, Anderfell, at this point. I'd need to sit down and count. Because, yeah, it's definitely into the hundreds. And thank you, by the way, Tigress. I love tea houses in my world. I have tea houses and coffee shops as well. Which, in the third era of the world, all the coffee shops was... The part of the world that they played in was called the LUS, the Loriadoran Unitary State. And one of the governing families was literally the hipster family, basically. And all they did was run coffee shops, tea houses, and chocolate shops. And thank you, Tide Runner. I see your save there. I will do so momentarily. I will ask Tide Runner, actually, that you're here. Are you okay with the Blue Cup Tea House being in Seeker's Respite? I do have to ask you because it is your character's hometown that you created, so... But I can see it being an interesting one to put in here. I still like to ask because you are the original creator of the map, so... I have a feeling I'm going to put the Basilisk Tavern in the next town, though. I will ask about Rena being, what race is she? Or species? What would you like her to be? You glow. I know that the character glows. I've seen the character short, the character questionnaire. Thank you. She is a dwarf. He, she, they. Do you have a preference? Yes, I did see that. His markings are very specific as I think, a specific Simic hybrid trait. Yeah. Save. That's right. Do the save first. I don't think you did, Sand. I'm trying to remember. It has been a little while. So I'm not sure. Okay. Okay. So we'll try and get these bits of green. Okay. So some of these little green bits, in retrospect, I think the way I've done this in the past is actually the opposite and done the roads in after the fact. Oh, thank you, Tide Runner. It's okay, Xanderfell. I will actually be finishing up in about 10 minutes just because I do actually have to get some of my regular job done tonight. I've got a lot of editing to do for some audiobooks that I'm working on. So unfortunately, I do have to finish up tonight a little early. I think I remember something about the Lich stories, yes. Oh, geez, that is a lot of characters. Yeah, it really sucks when you don't get to like play out a character that you wanted to play as you wanted to play them. And I think yes, there we go. Do that a bit better. There we go. It makes sense that it's next to a council chamber and in the fancy expensive quarter. Yeah, that sucks. See if I can get these trees in before my time is up. This is true. good tea can hurt. And let's point out, bad green tea can also be absolutely awful. This is true. Well, and the best part about this, and part of the reason I asked if I could put the blue teacup tea house in here is, one, your character of Rena would actually, also judging by the fact that Tide Runner's character is the alchemist in this party, and they are from here. And they probably lived in these fancy digs up here because of who his family is. I have a strong sneaking suspicion that they would have actually gone and had tea there. Put on the last of these vines, so this area is done. Okay. And we are almost finished. Almost finished, which we're going to have to finish this up on Monday, unfortunately. At least I know that I am likely to be able to get this last island done in that 2-hour session. So we are almost complete with Seeker's Respite. Yay! The decision is what to do next after that. By the way, I don't know if you saw this. Is this gold enough for you, Tide Runner? Is that gold enough? I had to make it as bougie as I could. However, I want to thank everybody who came out, watched the video, watched the stream, and yeah, dropped in for a chat. It's always wonderful to have you here. Always love having everybody around to be able to talk about just general tabletop stuff, because we are a community that loves and supports our TTRPGs over here. Talking about TTRPGs, if you do want to catch more of me and Tidrunner, actually, you can catch us over on Evil One's channel tomorrow evening, playing Star Wars over there. If you follow my Twitter, I usually announce when we are going live over on Evil One's channel, so you can catch us over there. Or on Monday night, we even have Power Rangers with the wonderful Uzu Mecha, Steve Man, Dr. Psycho, and Barricade. Otherwise, I hope you have a wonderful morning, afternoon, evening, or night, wherever you are in the world. If you like what I do, don't hesitate to hit the follow button if you are not already, and turn on notifications so you know when I go live. Otherwise, if you're feeling really generous and you are able to, if you can't, that is a-okay, please feel free to subscribe. Otherwise, I will see you all next time on Monday morning for more Boomeadow builds, and I hope you all have a wonderful rest of the night. Bye.